If you're leading a finance team in a startup or scale up, there's a pretty good chance that your day gets swallowed up by Slack messages, maybe even Loom videos, email threads, random requests of, can you just? But being a strategic finance leader, it's not about replying faster and getting through all of these questions. Rather, it's about leading a bit better. So today in this video, I'm going to talk you through 10 practical tips with communication to help cut that noise, really increase your focus and build a bit more influence with your leadership team. My name's Alysha Randall. I'm a fractional CFO and I also train new and aspiring CFOs within startups or scale ups. And I also am the author of Financial Leadership Fundamentals, How to Become a CFO Within a Startup or Scale Up. So if this sounds interesting to you, then please do click on the subscribe button below. Okay, so let's start with the 10 tips. The first one is don't reply in real time by default. So I know I can also do this quite easily. Most of my clients, if not all, and my team are all on Slack. And you do see Slack popping up in the bottom corner of your screen. That is the default. So you can switch this off, but ultimately you are not a Slack bot. So you do need to sometimes set expectations around when you check messages. So personally, I like to go onto Slack just a few times a day rather than just living on it. Now, this obviously depends with all around the business, but I think that if you get a response within a couple of hours, it's generally works quite okay. People do know that you're either working or you're in meetings or what have you. So I feel that responding within a couple of hours or sometimes even half a day is still fine. Now, I obviously work with clients outside, so being a fractional CFO, I'm not in the business. It is much easier for me to only check Slack or respond to Slack within 24 hours. But obviously, when you're in-house, it's a little bit harder. But you do want to make sure that you're not just, as soon as you see that little pop up in the bottom right corner of your screen, that you just don't click on it and respond immediately. So if you've been doing that consistently for years, then obviously you're constantly being distracted. You're not able to focus on work. And also you find that people expect you to do it as well. So if you're a bit nervous about that, then maybe check at the beginning of every hour and then reducing it slightly more, something like this. But ideally, you want to make sure that you're not auto responding. You can put, particularly if you really do have a deadline that you have to stick to, or you really do have a meeting that needs your focus, you can actually change your status as well on Slack. So you can change it to in meeting or response slowly or something so that people are aware that you're not going to be responding quickly. And if you do decide to do this as well, you might want to take your Slack notifications at the bottom of your screen off. So whether you do that while you're just focusing on something and it needs your focus, or you do that permanently, up to you, but it is something that you can do. Number two is summarize before you go into the details. This is more about the way that you are communicating, but also the way people are going to communicate back to you. So I've certainly received emails that are ridiculously long, and I'm not very good at going through a lot of detail. I'm more a big picture person, a high level person, what do I need to do type of person. So I would definitely suggest that if your message is going to be, say, longer than 3 lines, then you may just want to write what you need from them right at the beginning, and then what you need from them as a reminder right at the bottom, like a call to action, even like a sales and marketing type email. So a perfect example is you may start an email saying cash is down by 100K versus forecast due to the timing of an enterprise invoice. We need to make sure we catch this back up next month. details below. So you summarize it right at the top, but you do include the details if somebody wants to know the details. Generally, I find the founder doesn't, the sales leader does, but it's all there. And then they can read that top line. They know very quickly what the email is about. And then if they want to know more, they can. The reason why you also want to do it this way is because you are more likely to get feedback or get a response, essentially, particularly if you really want a response. So if you send an email like this, then you're more likely to hear from someone quickly. Whereas if you have quite a long email without a summary or a call to action at the top and the bottom, then people may just put that to a side and look at it at a later date. Number 3 is to be really explicit about deadlines. So you want to, two things, stop being vague. But I'm not very good at being vague. But what I am very bad at is assuming that everyone knows. I can tell you right now, assumptions is generally the biggest problem with communication, I would say. Say, for example, you write an email and you say, let me know what you think, as one of your call to actions at the bottom of an email or a Slack message. I can tell you right now that you're not going to get response for that. So you might want to write something like, please confirm approval by 2 p.m. tomorrow, or I need this input by Friday to finalize the cash forecast, or I'll assume approval if no reply by Monday, end of day. That one's a little bit trickier with finance, but if it's something that doesn't necessarily, really need hard and fast response, you can utilize something like that. But basically, if you don't ask for what you need, then you're not going to get it. So make sure that you are a bit more explicit, but also never assume that someone knows what you want. Just tell them what you want. Number 4 is don't let the loudest voice win. Now, I can say that this is very easy to succumb to, particularly when you're quite junior, is to just because someone is panicking loudly in Slack, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the most important issue. So you may want to just be really structured with your updates, but also with how people are responding. There's a fine balance. Obviously, to someone, something might be super important, but in the overall context, it might not be. However, you also might need to find out why they're panicking. There may be a reason as to why they need something quite urgent. It may be something to do with a really important customer. And therefore, sometimes worthwhile finding out why they're quite stressed about that and why you need to react quickly. Sometimes it's legitimate, and sometimes it's not. So you may also want to think about including things as part of communication, things like cash flow trackers, board slides, weekly posts, to keep priorities visible, and so that you're leading and not reacting, being proactive and not just reacting to someone stressing. Number 5 is to set meeting cadence for key topics. So not everything belongs in Slack. And if you find yourself having some messy back and forths every week, then sometimes you may need to have a proper recurring meeting. So it might be weekly, like payment scheduling, cash runway, because you're trying to get founders time. Particularly, I encourage this with our bookkeepers as well, is if they really need some dedicated focused time from a founder, it's best to just stick 15 minutes recurring in their diaries so that you can get that time rather than just going backwards and forwards on Slack for a couple of days. Fortnightly board prep fundraising updates, if you need to do a bit of that, it is a constant recurring requests, then maybe you just stick something in the diary, even if it's just a time booked on your diary that says that, and you notify everybody, okay, on this date, every second Friday, I'm going to send out this update. So if people know that something's coming, they're not going to constantly Slack you. And then monthly budget versus actual review. Ideally, this should be scheduled rather than just having it on Slack. So this helps create space for bigger discussions and reduces Slack noise, essentially. Number six is to push back on unclear requests in a nice way. So if someone asks you, can you just pull a quick report? You don't want to default to yes, I'll send that to you today. It might be, what decision are you trying to make? And this kind of positions you as a strategic partner. It saves you from running pointless numbers that no one uses. It also gives you a bit of context. So if it's something that's just ad hoc, you understand exactly what they're asking for, potentially may already have something that could help them. Or if it's maybe going to be a recurring task, you can put that within your team and as part of that reporting process and maybe build a template so that you can do that. Number seven, flag trade-offs in plain English. If somebody wants to hire or they want to spend something quickly, instead of saying, no, we can't afford that, or no, we're at risk of breaching a covenant, you might want to say something like, well, if we pay this now, we can't afford to hire in January. If we do this, then we need to reduce this. Ideally, you want to translate finance language into real choices, not just saying, oh, we can't do that, rather than just pulling the purse strings all the time. It's getting the leadership team and management to understand that you have finite resources, which is time and cash. And so with these resources, how are we going to utilize them? And so that's why you can show that just because we don't want to pay for something because, we're a finance person and we just want to close the purse strings, it's more like, okay, we have this much cash. So if we spend X amount on this, then we need to pull back on this because this is all we can spend. So it's basically treating people more like leaders and adults rather than just saying no all the time. Number eight is getting visual when it helps. You've probably heard a million times, a picture tells 1,000 words. A budget chart or a screenshot can save you, say, a really lengthy explanation. So try like red, amber, green traffic lights in the cash summary, 2-minute loom with a graph on a screen. Just visual is faster understanding and faster decisions. It's always easier to communicate with charts and graphs rather than loads and loads of words. Number nine is to repeat the strategic message. You are going to feel like a broken record, and that's exactly what you should be doing. So you do want to keep repeating. For example, our focus is extending runway to July, or we need a 50% gross margin hit on our Series A plan, or whatever the big strategic goals are. Because your job is to, one of your jobs rather, is to make sure you're keeping everyone on the right path. Founders can see shiny new objects and go off on a tangent, so can other leaders. But really, there are 3 to 5 strategic goals that the business wants to achieve. And so, finance leaders who really repeat this strategic message then becomes trusted voices in the business because that repetition equals alignment, essentially. And number 10 is to use a 24-hour cool down rule. So if a panic slack from CEO at 10 p.m., you don't want to reply straight away within reason. Obviously, you want to pause, take a breath, gather some facts, and respond a bit more clearly the next morning because your calm and informed tone really builds confidence and can reduce chaos. Can sometimes fail at this one. I can really get swept up in it, and rather than just take stock and look at what's really going on before I respond clearly, sometimes things can look like they're completely not working and there is a panicked founder. But I've found that if I do actually do a bit of research and gather the facts before responding, you respond to someone that's also calmer, but also sometimes the panic is unfounded. Not always, obviously, but sometimes it is. And so, therefore, your response can be much clearer and much more useful. I know, for example, we had a panicked founder about a board pack where something didn't look right and they were very, very concerned that a heap of revenue had been missed. Once we did a bit of research, we realized that was not the case. Rather, the way that a certain KPI had been tracked in prior periods compared to current periods was different, and therefore it was giving a funny reading. So we needed to, and potentially we should have done this before the founder notice, but we should have recalculated the KPI using the new definition from prior year so that it was gave a clearer view rather than showing this funny variance. What I do want to say is you don't need to work faster, you just need to communicate a bit better. So start with a couple of these tips, hopefully, and then you'll see a bit less noise, more focus, and a more way of influence, but also more headspace. Part of being a finance leader is you do have to do deep work. I mean, actually, nearly everyone has to do deep work, but trying to not get distracted constantly and find the time to do deep work, you can only really do that if you implement some of these tips or others. I'd love to know if you have other suggestions to help you with the Slack or Teams messaging chaos. If you want to be a strong finance leader in the next 12 months, then I've got 3 tips for you. The first one is to subscribe to this channel. As I said, I do a video every single Thursday. I'm talking to new and aspiring finance leader within startups or scale-ups. I've been working with startups for 20 years now. And so if that's interesting to you, then do click on that subscribe button. The second one is to check out finance leadership fundamentals, how to become a CFO in a startup or scale up. At the end of every single chapter, I've included loads of actions that you can implement in your role today, even if you're at a finance managerial role and you want to take the step up. You can start implementing some of these immediately. And then the final one is to take a look at our FLF course, where not only do we go even deeper into these same topics, but we also have Q&A sessions where we have a chat and talk about their specific challenges and their specific role and how they can implement these changes and boost their leadership skills within their role. So thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers.